I'm Elise Hartley, 34, youngest sibling and freelance interior designer. It was just past 5 p.m. when I stepped out of the Uber and onto the gravel path outside St. Martin's Church Hall. The evening air was heavy with late spring warmth, dampened slightly by the scent of lilies wilting inside. A long white banner that read, "In loving memory of Gerald Hartley," hung above the front door. My father. A crowd was already gathering near the entrance. Family, neighbors, co-workers. Most wore black or navy. Some held programs. I held nothing. I adjusted the hem of my black dress and tugged my tote higher up my shoulder. I hadn't been invited. I found out about the wake through a cousin's blurry Instagram story posted just hours earlier. The family group chat hadn't pinged once. Not for me. As I reached the entrance, a tall man in a charcoal suit with an earpiece and clipboard blocked my path. "Name, please," he asked. "Elise Hartley?" I said, clearing my throat. He looked down at his clipboard, flipping a few pages. "I don't see you on the guest list." "I'm his daughter," I added quickly. "Youngest." He gave me a practiced smile. "I'm sorry, miss, but I've been given strict instructions only those listed may enter the hall. You can wait outside if you like." I could feel my cheeks flush, not with embarrassment but with the bitter sting of familiarity, of being sidelined, forgotten, or worse, deliberately erased. Before I could reply, I heard a familiar voice behind the doors, rising above the murmurs of the reception. My brother. Honestly, I don't know where Elise has been living these days. Probably still renting some shoebox apartment she won't show anyone, he said, loud enough for the crowd to chuckle politely. My jaw clenched. I hadn't spoken to Ryan in over a year, not since our father's stroke, when Ryan conveniently forgot to loop me into the care plans. I turned slightly, facing the parking lot, pretending to fidget with my phone. The guard gave me a pitying glance, but said nothing. Just stood there like a bouncer at a party I was born into, but never quite belonged at. To anyone who's ever shown up to a family event and felt like a stranger who's been told, directly or indirectly, that they're less than, or too little, or too late, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever had your own sibling drama, click like. Subscribe if you know the feeling of carrying quiet accomplishments while your family measures you by your past. I took a breath, trying to steady my pulse, already turning to leave when the door burst open again. "Wait," a woman called out. She was sharply dressed, a navy blue sheath dress under a tailored coat, clipboard tucked under one arm, expression professional but urgent. "Are you Elise Hartley?" I blinked. "Yes. I'm Amanda Gresham, executor of Gerald Hartley's estate." Every eye near the entrance turned. Mr. Hartley left specific instructions that his daughter Elise be granted access first, and she paused, lifting a set of brass keys tied with a black ribbon, that she received these today, in full view of the family. Gasps, some subtle, some not. Ryan appeared behind her, color draining from his face as he saw the keys dangling in her hand. Amanda stepped toward me and placed the keys in my open palm. "Your father left you the house." "Elise." I didn't speak. I couldn't. The porch fell silent. Even the man with the clipboard stepped aside like he'd seen a ghost. And for the first time in years, my presence wasn't just tolerated. It shattered the room. Amanda's shoes made a neat, deliberate clicking sound as she turned and walked back through the double doors, leaving me standing there with the keys warm in my hand. I hadn't even closed my fingers around them before a wave of whispering swept through the entryway. Some faces tilted toward me with cautious interest. Others turned sharply away. Ryan didn't move. His face was pale, mouth parted slightly, the corners twitching like he wanted to say something. But the words had slipped too far out of reach. He'd always been good with crowds, not so good with silences. I stepped forward, The man with the clipboard didn't speak this time. He just held the door open for me as if I'd always been meant to walk through it. The inside of the hall smelled like cologne and roses. I counted 5 wreaths, each with a placard and one photograph of Dad at his retirement party, the only one where he wasn't holding a drink. The tables were arranged like a wedding reception, neatly labeled name cards, a buffet of finger sandwiches and pasta salads. Somewhere, classical music played softly, awkwardly, behind the dull buzz of conversation. My mother was at the far end of the room, surrounded by friends from the church. She hadn't noticed me yet. I didn't go to her. I didn't go to anyone. Ryan caught up with me near the memorial table, the one with our father's ashes, his watch, his war medals, and an old family photo from 1996. Back when Dad still had dark hair and I still wore glittery butterfly clips. "Elise?" Ryan said quietly. "What was that?" "What was what?" He lowered his voice, glancing toward the cluster of people by the windows, the keys, the house. "Amanda didn't say anything about that to me. Maybe because you weren't supposed to know until now," I said, setting my tote down by the edge of the table. His jaw tensed. "You haven't even lived there in over a decade." "Why would he?" I cut him off. "You mean, why didn't he leave it to you?" He didn't answer. I turned to face the urn, a smooth, matte gray ceramic, sitting in a small box draped with navy velvet. "Because I'm the one who took care of it," I said, voice low. "The house. Not Dad. Not after the stroke. You weren't there." "That's not fair," Ryan muttered. "No. What's not fair is acting like I vanished when I was the one fixing the roof leaks, paying the property tax, patching the walls you and your friends wrecked every summer break." He exhaled, folding his arms. "So this is revenge. This is reality," I said, flatly. I could feel the heat of eyes on us, some familiar, most not. Aunt June by the corner, a cousin pretending to look at a flower arrangement while obviously eavesdropping. No one intervened. They just waited to see what came next. I picked up a photo of Dad holding me as a toddler. His arms had been stronger then, not yet hollowed by time or guilt or whiskey. I remembered that version of him best. The one who carried me when no one else noticed I was tired. He said I reminded him of Mom. I murmured. Ryan rolled his eyes. "That's rich." I looked up. "You don't know anything about her." "I know enough," he snapped. "You think you do," I said, eyes narrowing. "But she used to write me letters. After she left. Dad didn't know. But she did. Every year. Birthday cards, handmade drawings. You didn't get them because she said you always sided with him." He flinched, visibly. His shoulders shrank slightly into his blazer. I softened. Just a little. "I didn't keep all the letters," I said, more gently. "But I kept enough to know she wanted us to stay close. That's why I stayed in the city, close to the house, close to Dad, because she asked me to." Ryan stared at the floor. The silence stretched. In the background, someone tapped a glass with a spoon. A speech was beginning, but we weren't listening. "I'm not trying to humiliate you, Ryan," I added, my voice barely audible. "But Dad wanted this. He didn't know how to say sorry, so he wrote it into the will. That house was his way of saying I mattered. Once, finally." "I always thought you were embarrassed by it," he said quietly. I shook my head. "I was embarrassed by what we became in it, not the walls." He looked at me, then really looked. His eyes were red around the edges, not from crying, from holding it in too long. "I didn't know," he whispered. I gave him a tired smile. "That's the problem. No one ever asked." Behind us, Amanda stood near the podium now, flipping through the notes for the formal reading. My name had been placed on the final page. I didn't need to read it. I'd lived it. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, like he didn't know where to stand anymore. You can still visit the house? I said suddenly. Nothing changes that. His eyes flickered up in surprise. I mean it, I added. I'm not locking it away like a trophy. I just want you to remember it's ours because I kept it standing, not because it was owed to me. He nodded slowly. Okay. Then, awkwardly, almost clumsily, he reached out and touched my arm. Just for a second. A strange, unsure gesture, but I felt it. The mood in the room had changed. I saw it in how people looked at me now, confused, curious, some ashamed. I picked up my tote and turned toward the back door, the one that led into the garden behind the church hall. I needed air. The keys were still in my palm. Cool now. Weighty. And for once, they belonged exactly where they were. The garden behind the hall was nearly empty. A narrow stone path wound through trimmed hedges and patches of forget-me-nots, ending at a small bench beneath an overgrown willow tree. I sat down slowly, tucking the house keys into the front pocket of my coat, as if they might slip away if I wasn't careful. The murmurs from the wake dulled behind the brick walls. From here, it was just birds, wind, and the faint hum of traffic blocks away. I leaned back, exhaling slowly through my nose, and let my shoulders fall for the first time that day. I thought of the house. I could see the chipped front steps, the blue shutters I'd painted myself one summer when I was 25, and broke. The way the mailbox always tilted slightly left no matter how often I tried to fix it. I remembered the sound the hallway floor made outside Dad's room, a creaking sigh that always gave me away when I tried to sneak past in the early hours. The truth was, I never wanted the house. I just didn't want to lose the last place where I still existed as someone's daughter. Footsteps approached slowly from behind. Not Ryan this time. Lighter. Softer. Elise. I turned. It was my cousin Clara, our aunt's daughter. Tall, striking, always put together in that effortless way that came from decades of silent maternal pressure. I thought you might be out here, she said, sitting beside me without waiting for an invitation. Her perfume was subtle and expensive, some faint floral note I couldn't place. Word travels fast inside. I muttered. She nodded. People are talking. Ryan's not exactly known for keeping things quiet when he's upset. I'm not trying to cause a scene. I know, Clara said. But you caused one anyway. A good one. I frowned. You think so? Absolutely, she said. You should have seen Aunt June's face, like someone told her the queen had been overthrown. I snorted. She never liked me. She never liked anyone who reminded her that approval isn't owed. You didn't chase their attention. You just existed. That threatened people more than you know. I turned toward her. Why are you telling me this now? Because it matters now, she said simply. And because I remember when you were 16 and I found you crying in the garage during Grandma's anniversary party. You said no one had spoken to you all night, not even your parents. My stomach tightened. That memory had faded to a dusty corner of my mind, one I rarely touched. You remember that? Of course I do, Clara said. You looked like you were trying to disappear into the lawn chair. I laughed lightly, a bitter sound. I probably was. You've always been the one to carry everything in silence, but silence doesn't mean absence. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The garden seemed to lean into our stillness. Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. I meant to give you this earlier, she said, handing it to me. Dad gave it to me a week ago. Said he found it tucked into an old ledger in the garage while cleaning out your father's desk. I stared at the envelope. My name was scrawled in thick, trembling handwriting. Gerald's. No question. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of lined notepad paper. A few creases, a faint smell of old tobacco. Elise, I don't say things right. And I didn't raise you right either. But I saw you. Even when I acted like I didn't. I saw you fixing things I broke. I saw you visiting when no one else did. I saw you forgiving me before I ever deserved it. You were the only one who stayed quiet when I lashed out, and the only one who didn't hold it over me after. The house is yours, because I couldn't give you peace in life. But maybe this will help after. Keep the door open. Dad. I read the letter twice before folding it again with trembling fingers. Clara didn't say anything. She just waited. Her presence didn't demand attention. It gave me room. Thank you, I said finally. My voice cracked on the second word. She squeezed my hand briefly. He was a hard man to love. Elise. But you did it anyway. That counts for something. I stared at the willow tree. Its long green tendrils moved slightly in the breeze, curtain-like and quiet. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, I admitted. The house is just walls and plumbing and old furniture, but somehow it feels heavier than anything I've ever owned. Maybe you don't need to do anything, Clara said. Not yet. Just sit with it. Let it be a house again before it becomes anything else. The sun shifted, angling down behind the church steeple. People were beginning to leave. I could see the shadows on the gravel path lengthening, coats being buttoned. Quiet goodbyes. Clara stood. Come by for tea next week. I nodded. I'd like that. She smiled. You know, you always made people nervous because you didn't need to be the loudest. Some of us admired that. Some of us envied it. I tilted my head. Which were you both? She said, before walking back toward the hall. Alone again. I unfolded the letter one last time. My name in his writing still looked strange, like a language he never learned to speak fluently but tried anyway in the end. I slipped it back into the envelope and tucked it beside the keys in my pocket. When I finally stood, the weight of them no longer felt heavy. They felt earned. By the time I made it back through the church hall, most of the guests had already left. A few plastic cups sat half full on the corner tables, and someone had started clearing the buffet, scraping coleslaw and cold pasta into a trash bag with the kind of robotic grace that comes after hours of polite smiling. The air was quieter now, less perfume, more Lysol. Ryan was leaning against the far wall near the coat rack, tapping his phone, then looking up like he'd been waiting. He put it away when he saw me. You leaving? He asked. Yeah, I think I've been here long enough. He nodded, shifted his weight. I told Mom you got the house, and she said she wasn't surprised. I blinked. Really? She said you reminded Dad of someone he lost too soon, and he didn't know how to carry that. I folded my arms. That's poetic. Did she say it before or after she side-eyed me like I was a stranger with a crowbar? She's complicated, he muttered. Always has been. That was the most generous thing either of us had said about her in years. I reached for my coat, tugging the sleeves straight. You know I'm not coming to the family brunch tomorrow. I figured. Are you? He gave a weak laugh. Someone has to explain why your name's on the deed. I looked at him. You don't owe anyone explanations. Neither do you, he said. And for the first time, he meant it. We stood in silence again, neither of us moving. There were too many things between us. Childhood Christmases where I got books and he got gadgets. Teenage years when I disappeared into internships while he stayed local. Summers we spent pretending we were close but orbiting different stars. And yet, this moment of standing quietly at the end of a wake, with words we didn't have the vocabulary to say it meant something. I'll come by the house next week, he said eventually. If that's okay? It is. He gave a small nod, then stepped aside to let me pass. Outside. The sky was deepening, pale violet turning navy. The parking lot was mostly empty, and I walked past Dad's old neighbor, Mr. Lennox, who gave me a polite nod without seeming to recognize me. I used to mow his lawn for $5 when I was 12. The Uber arrived in a quiet hush, headlights cutting across the pavement. I slid into the back seat, the keys still tucked in my pocket, and gave the address I hadn't spoken aloud in over 3 years. 143 Tanglewood Lane, I said. Take the long way. The driver didn't ask why. He just nodded. We drove past streets I used to walk after school, corners where I once smoked stolen cigarettes and thought I was clever, the diner where Dad took us for pancakes after church, before he stopped going to church and then stopped talking about anything sacred at all. The house appeared just as I remembered. 2 stories. Brick. Faded blue shutters. One gutter still slightly loose near the right corner. The porch light hadn't been changed in a year. It flickered softly like an uncertain candle. I stepped out and stood for a while on the sidewalk, letting the wind pick up the hem of my coat. My shoes crunched the gravel softly as I moved toward the steps. There was a note taped to the door. It was Ryan's handwriting this time. Didn't want you to come home to a dead bulb. Hope this one lasts longer than the others. R. Above the note. A new porch light glowed steady and warm. The keys fit easily into the lock. Inside, everything smelled the same aged wood, a hint of old leather, and the faint trace of pine cleaner that never quite masked the years. The living room was empty except for the sofa Dad refused to get rid of, and the grandfather clock that hadn't worked since 2012. I didn't turn on the lights right away. I just stood there in the dark, hearing the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, and the distant sound of the refrigerator humming like a tired old friend. Upstairs, the master bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Slowly. The bed was still made, the duvet folded in the military way Dad learned in his youth. Hospital corners sharp as ever. The lamp on the side table still had the same beige shade. The drawer still had the little brass lion-shaped knob I'd installed for him when his fingers started to shake too much. I sat at the edge of the bed. My fingers drifted toward the drawer and opened it. Inside, folded neatly, was a small pile of papers. Not legal, not official, just drawings, childish ones. My handwriting at 7, 9, 12, crayons, pencils. To Daddy. Happy birthday. You're the best. I love you even when you yell. He kept them. Even when I thought he'd thrown me away. He kept them. I sat there for a long time. Eventually, I walked back downstairs and turned on the lamp in the living room. The light warmed the walls. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture of the entryway, and sent it to Ryan. Thanks for the bulb. It's warm in here. He replied a minute later. It always was. You just couldn't see it from where you stood. I smiled. Not because it made sense, but because it almost did. I locked the door from the inside. Then, I took off my shoes, hung my coat, and finally sat on the couch like I belonged. Because now, I did. The next morning, I woke to sunlight pouring through the dusty blinds in the living room. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, the throw blanket still tucked behind a cushion, the scent of the house settling into my hair and sleeves like a memory that wouldn't leave. For a moment, I just stared at the ceiling, watching a patch of light flicker across the cracked plaster. A spider had made a web in the corner above the fireplace, a small thread trembling with the morning breeze. I didn't move. I didn't want to. It was the first time in years I hadn't woken up to the anxiety of rent or deadlines or city noise clawing at my mind. Just this strange stillness, both unfamiliar and entirely mine. I eventually rose, barefoot, tiptoeing across the cold wood floor to the kitchen. The old tile clicked under my toes. I opened the cabinets out of habit. Cereal boxes well past expiration. A bottle of Worcestershire sauce older than me. Mismatched mugs. One had a faded smiley face and the words, "World's okayest dad." I poured a glass of water, the faucet sputtering slightly before settling into a steady stream. The water here always tasted like minerals and rust. I took a sip anyway. At 8:13 a.m., there was a knock on the door. I tensed. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one even knew I'd slept here. I peeked through the curtain. Outside stood Mrs. Klein from 2 houses down. She held a small plastic bag and a container with a blue lid. Her cardigan matched the color of her front door lavender. Floral, slightly faded by sun. I opened the door. "Elise," she said, eyes twinkling behind her oversized glasses. "I hoped you were here." "Hi, Mrs. Klein." I saw the porch light was on. Figured someone finally came home. She lifted the container. I brought over some lemon loaf. Still warm. "Thought maybe you could use something sweet." I smiled and stepped aside. "Would you like to come in?" She paused. Just for a moment. These knees don't like long visits. Inside, she looked around like she was revisiting a museum of her own memories. "I used to babysit you. You know," she said, sitting gently on the edge of the recliner. "You once glued your brother's toy soldiers to the bathroom mirror, claimed it was an art installation." I laughed. "That sounds right." She handed me the lemon loaf. "I was sorry to hear about your father. He could be difficult, but I always thought he loved you in his own way." "I think so too," I said quietly. She eyed me. "And now the house is yours." I nodded. "Good," she said firmly. "It was always more yours than anyone else's." I sat beside her on the edge of the couch. She leaned forward, clasping her hands. "You know, this street used to be full of people who knew each other. Now everyone keeps their curtains closed. But if you really stay, I think things could shift again." "I don't know what I'm doing yet," I confessed. "That's the best place to start," she said, rising slowly. "Don't let anyone make you feel like your roots aren't deep enough just because they took a little longer to grow." She squeezed my hand before she left. "And tell Ryan he still owes me an apology for setting off that firecracker in my birdbath in '98. "I will," I said, laughing. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there for a minute longer, holding the lemon loaf like it was sacred. That afternoon, I took a walk through the backyard. The grass had grown tall, curling over the edges of the brick path that led to the old shed. A rake leaned drunkenly against the fence, and the swing Dad had built when I was 7 still hung by one chain, gently creaking in the wind. I sat on the back step and pulled out my phone. There was a message from Ryan. "Mom's asking about you. She says she didn't know you'd come back." I told her it wasn't about coming back. "You never really left." I stared at the screen. Then I typed. "I don't need her to apologize, just to stop rewriting me out of the story." His reply came 2 minutes later. "Maybe let her hear you say that." Out loud. "She's coming by the house tomorrow." I didn't tell her not to. I closed the phone. The idea of seeing her in this space made something twist behind my ribs. But maybe it was time. That evening, I cleared out the upstairs bedroom, the one that used to be mine. I opened old drawers filled with forgotten journals and folded letters and ticket stubs from movies I barely remembered. I found a tiny ceramic turtle I'd made in 5th grade, its shell painted blue and gold. I placed it on the windowsill, facing the street. That night, I made tea in the chipped kettle, sat on the porch, and watched the neighborhood windows light up one by one. Someone across the street played jazz too loud. A dog barked 2 houses over. The world felt ordinary, and in that ordinariness, I felt real. The next day, at 10:01 a.m., my mother rang the doorbell. I waited 3 seconds before answering. She wore a pale gray coat and her church pearls, the ones she only brought out for important moments or guilt. "Hi, Elise," she said. "Come in." She stepped over the threshold like the house might bite her. Her eyes flicked over the walls, the furniture, the kitchen visible in the background. She said nothing about the changes. "I heard about the house," she said finally. "I figured you would." She didn't sit. "I didn't think he'd do that," she added. "You didn't think he'd acknowledge me?" She flinched. Just slightly, then straightened. "I didn't know how to reach you after everything." "That's not true," I said. "You just didn't want to risk hearing something that would make you question your part in it." She sat then, on the couch, posture stiff. "You're angry." "No," I said. "I'm exhausted." A long silence. She looked around again. "It's clean. Lived in." "It is." Another pause. "You were always the quiet one," she murmured. "I thought maybe you didn't care as much." "I cared more," I said. "I just learned not to ask for what wasn't being offered." She stared at her hands, then finally looked up. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not protecting you, for letting him drown out your voice." My throat tightened. I didn't respond right away. "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said. "I just want space to exist in this family without having to prove I belong." She nodded, and for the first time, she didn't try to argue. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "He wrote me something too," she said, placing it on the table. "Said to give it to you if I ever came here." I didn't open it. Not yet. We sat quietly, the house breathing around us. No fight, no resolution, just a pause. And maybe that was enough. My mother left after 20 minutes. She didn't stay for tea. She didn't ask to walk through the rooms. But before she stepped back out into the sunlight, she paused in the doorway and touched the frame with her fingertips just lightly, like it was something alive. Then she looked back at me and said, "It's good to see the house looking like a home again." I didn't answer. I just nodded, and then closed the door gently behind her. The envelope she had left sat untouched on the side table. I wasn't ready to read it yet. Some letters are heavier before they're even opened. That afternoon, I wandered from room to room, cleaning as I went. I found old receipts in drawers, curtain rods in the hall closet, half-used candles in the bathroom. The vacuum was still in the same spot it had been years ago, wedged behind the pantry door, its cord tangled like a memory never unraveled. I lit one of the candles. A soft vanilla scent filled the living room as I sank back into the couch and finally turned on the television, nothing too loud. Just background noise. Something to remind me I didn't need to be alert anymore. At dusk, Ryan came by. He didn't knock. He just walked up the porch like he always had, leaned in the doorway, and said, "Want to come see something?" I didn't ask what. I grabbed my coat and followed. He took me down the street to the old vacant lot behind the high school. A new construction site had started there, a future community center, according to the banner. But that's not why he brought me. "You remember the willow tree?" he asked, pointing to the far corner. I did. It used to be massive, towering, its branches draped like curtains over the sidewalk. We used to meet under it before school when we didn't want to walk in together but still wanted to know the other one was close. "They cut it down last month," he said. "I thought you'd want to know. They're going to pave it over." I looked at the bare patch of soil. A stump still sat in the middle like a memory caught mid-sentence. "Shame," I said. It always felt like it was holding something secret. "I thought it was invincible," Ryan murmured. I looked at him. We thought a lot of things were. He glanced at me, then away. I'm not good at rebuilding things. I'm usually better at pretending nothing broke. Then this is new, I said gently. Yeah, he admitted. It is. We stood there a while, watching a place that once held us both disappear piece by piece. That night, I sat in the dining room with the envelope in front of me. I hadn't touched it since my mother left, but something about seeing the tree's absence made me want to open it before it became too late again. I unfolded the letter carefully. Elise, if she gives this to you, it means you let her in again. I didn't think you would. Maybe I didn't think you should. But I hoped. I know what I did. I know what I didn't say. I know I let your brother carry the spotlight and let you carry the consequences. I saw you even when I acted like I didn't. It's the one thing I never forgave myself for. The house is just wood and brick. But you were the foundation. Don't let them rewrite your place. Not again. And don't let the silence between you and them become permanent. It's heavy, and it will bury you if you let it. Keep the house open, even when it hurts. Dad. I read it again. Then again. I placed it beside the first letter he'd written, the one Clara gave me. Different pen, same hand, a little shakier. I stared out the front window. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. In the days that followed, I began reclaiming the house, not changing it, just remembering it. I cleaned out the garage, swept away years of dust, found a box labeled Elise's school stuff in Dad's handwriting. Inside were my third-grade spelling bee certificate, a ribbon from a science fair, and a sketch I made of the house when I was 11. He'd kept that too. I called a contractor to fix the porch rail. I asked Mrs. Klein for a recommendation on a gardener. I found my grandmother's crock pot buried in the basement and left it running one night with stew bubbling inside. Ryan dropped by with a new smoke alarm. Clara brought over a houseplant. Even my mother called once to say she had found a photo of me as a toddler asleep in Dad's lap, and would I like to have it? I said yes. I didn't throw away the old things. I placed them in drawers, on shelves, tucked behind glass in the hallway cabinet. I wanted people to see that time had passed here, but that it had not passed in vain. One morning, I opened the curtains in the upstairs bedroom and watched the light fall in patterns on the carpet. I'd spent so many nights here staring at the ceiling, afraid of what I'd grow up to be. Now I was here again, different, but still myself. I heard voices outside, children riding bikes, dogs barking, a couple arguing lightly over whether they locked the car. Life was happening, and I was in it. That evening, I opened the front door and sat on the porch, the house behind me glowing with the warmth of a home in use. I looked down the street. A woman passed with a stroller. She smiled at me like I belonged. I smiled back. Ryan had been wrong about one thing. This wasn't about returning. It was about finally arriving, and letting that be enough.